Our guest is Alexander-Julian. He is a New York-based creative, I'll say fashionista, fashion designer, stylist, travel, culture, and all the intersections, you can name them. First of all, what does it feel like being a fashion designer, just being in the fashion space? What's life like being there?
It's an interesting lane. I think it's something that growing up, I wasn't like necessarily always aware of. Just because, growing up in a Nigerian home, there are a few career paths that were inspired and pushed to pursue, and fashion definitely wasn't one of them. So being able to be here, be in this space and and I would say like be successful, it feels like kind of surreal. Feels like really important to me. It feels something that I'm doing not just for myself, but for young, African creatives around the continent, around the world, and just all over.
That's interesting. All right, let's look at the fact that you've written, you've designed, you've styled for the big names, and you're here as well for the big event here happening in Lagos. So tell us about the event and what does it feel like doing this outside of Africa and coming back to Africa as well?
So this is Lagos Fashion Week's 10th year anniversary. So I'm really excited to be back here for that. I think I was actually speaking about this a while back. I think Lagos Fashion Week is one of my, favorite events on the continent because I think I'm a bit biased. I do believe Nigeria is a great fashion capital for the continent, and so it's really good to be able to have a space where everybody around the continent, models, designers, stylists, can come to kind of celebrate African fashion and kind of have a space to then push out the content and push out the things that we're creating, that they're creating here on the continent into the world, because I think there's a lot of eyes here. So it feels great to be back, to be celebrating 10 years, but it also feels really good to be able to be kind of like a liaison on the, in the world for the things that are happening here on the continent. One of the things that I consider most important for my career is when I'm able to kind of highlight African brands, highlight African talent, just because I feel like there's so much of it, and so much that goes unseen and unheard. So I think it's important that, those of us that are outside of the continent use our voices and our platforms to bring focus back to the continent.
That's interesting. Some of your inspiration behind your fashion designs, your think through, happens to come from, of course, the deepest stories about Africa. Absolutely. You want to share some of them with us?
Absolutely. I think, again, my culture is the thing that inspires my work. A lot of my work is based in the study of culture, the study of style and travel and all their intersections. And I think, growing up in the home that I did, I grew up in Houston, Texas, where there's a lot of Nigerians.
Yeah. A lot of Africans. You have Ghanaians in one end. You have.
So I love that about Houston because it feels like I get to be in a home away from home. And so just being able to experience my culture there, and then being able to have that inspire the things that I'm working on, the colors, the way that we wear clothes, the way the structure in a lot of our garments, just the flair that we have. I think it's something that is, honestly deeply inspirational to a lot of my work, and just to the way that I move and the way that the things that separate my aesthetic from the aesthetic of the other people in the U.S.
That's right. I was going to ask you this question, and I'm going to do that right now. Julian, Alexander-Julian is another name known for another designer in the United States. So when I heard Alexander-Julian, I was like, oh wait, the Alexander-Julian from the US?
I know, right?
Like, oh, this is the African brother. Our very own African brother is coming. How do you manage that situation where people say, oh, it's Julian, Alexander? Oh, which one?
It's so funny. So my mother's name is Alexandra. So she named me to be some sort of junior, I guess, after her. So that's where the Alexander came from. I don't really know where the Julian came from, but it's funny because when I was growing up, I used to wear his clothes all the time. My mom would buy me his clothes all the time. It used to be cool to just have like my name on the back of my clothes. And I think into my second year working at GQ, and he's a heritage brand. I think his brand started like in the 70s.
Exactly.
And so in my second year working at GQ, I actually got to speak with him.
Oh.
And he was a great guy. I told him how much like him being a designer was just kind of, I wouldn't say like inspired me, but it was just something that was nice to kind of affirming, you know, of like my passion and things that I wanted to do. Really nice guy. I think luckily because of the things that I focus on, we don't our paths don't really cross as much like career work wise, because he's strictly a designer, and he has a market that he focuses on. A lot of my work is focused on Black and brown people, people of color, and then people on the continent. So I feel like our lanes don't cross as much, but it was really good to like have a chat with him and like kind of talk about like the things that we do find similar. Great guy. He invited me to like his house in North Carolina. I've been talking to his team. We're like, hopefully maybe in the future, hoping to like do something. So,
that's good. Quite interesting to note. And if you just joined us, well, this is Breakfast Central, and we have a very important guest here who has been pushing the narratives, no doubt, especially when it comes to fashion, design, creative, you name it. He's been doing that. First of all, lastly, let me just put it together. How have you been able to work with GQ for years, and what's the feeling like working with an international brand like that?
It was nice. So
and being African.
No, yeah, it was nice. I had always wanted to work for GQ. That was kind of like the thing that I had dreamed of as a kid, and I got to that goal pretty early in my career. So it was interesting to be there so early in my career. But it was great, and I think I learned a lot. I learned a lot about the industry, a lot of the politics of industry, but I also learned, I think, being driven as we are, you know, being African, I did a lot of work coming into like going into GQ that I think prepared me to be there, prepared me to like be taking on being a part of like an international brand. But I think being there taught me a lot about like how the industry works, just because again, you know, being African, there's only a few set of careers that we follow. So like I never had anybody to be like, okay, this is how the fashion industry works, because this is my cousin who works in the fashion industry. It's like, no, all my cousins are doctors, lawyers, or engineers, or, you know? So I learned so much from working there about the processes, about kind of the things that they don't talk about in fashion. It was interesting. It was a cultural shock, like working there, because you know, it's an international brand. It's I think in the time that I worked there, it was like, you know, not many people of color there. So I think kind of introducing them to a lot of the things that were interesting to me and people who look like me was like a cultural shock, and was like something that took a lot of time to push, but I think we got there. And I think that that even now that I've left, I no longer work there, I freelance now, I think they're still pushing that narrative and still doing very good to like kind of bring in people of color and stories, and diverse stories that are not just focused on people who all look the same.
All right, Alexander, I know we're pressed for time, but before you go, again, I just need to ask this question. Would you agree with me, just two-in-one question very briefly, would you agree with me, first of all, that the Afrobeat narrative has changed the perception of how people agree with everything that comes from Africa, be it fashion, music, food, the entire continent? And lastly, I'm also going to ask, which of the fashion brands do you really love from Africa? Maybe 2, 3?
Yeah, I have a bunch. I definitely think that Afrobeats has helped, because I think when you talk about culture and the way that culture is shared through music, through style, and I think that music being on the forefront of Africa is a great way for people to tap into what's going on here, and then continue to look in deeper, to look in like, okay, I love this artist. What is he wearing? Who are the designers that he's wearing? What are the foods that he's eating? Which is why I think it's important for African artists to support African businesses, designers, and all things on the continent. And then some of my favorite brands here, I mean, I have to say, it's so funny because I always say the same ones because I just really, really love them. And they're all good friends of mine. But I love Orange Culture. I love Emmy Casbit. I love Ree Lagos. I love Lisa Faloio, all of her work. I mean, I can literally go on for days, but those are just some of my favorites that I love working with, and really good people, I think, is a thing that.
All right, thank you so much for dropping by on Breakfast Central.
Of course, thank you for having me.
It's quite interesting. All right, Lagos, there we've had him here with us, Alexander-Julian. Don't forget, it's going to be in the 10th anniversary of the Lagos Fashion Week, and he'll be doing what he knows how to do best. Fashion is indeed a driver in talking about the African narrative.